Hi, welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and in this unprecedented time, I wanted to continue to podcast and bring you the voices of the people on the front lines who can help us all better understand what's happening in our industry and how to better prepare for when we come back. Today is April 21st, and we welcome Emily Hoskins. Emily is a senior producer at the Designory in Long Beach, California, and she works with clients like Subaru, Infiniti, and Nissan. I met Emily 10 years ago when she was producing at advertising agencies in Chicago. Since then, she has spent time as an agent and advocate for photographers and directors on the rep side of the business and currently applies that experience to her agency productions. She's been cartwheeling the finish lines of Ironman triathlons and marathons for the last 10 years, and she has her hopes on returning to Africa to climb Kilimanjaro as soon as it's safe to travel. Wow, I just want to get out the door and get to a grocery store, and you have your sights on Kilimanjaro. That is amazing, Emily. That's what I love about you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I hope that finish line is in my sights this year, but I'm okay if it has to get pushed back.
That's amazing. I love it, though. You have to have something to think forward to, Otherwise, how are you going to make it through?
Whether it's a finish line or a trip or just talking to you on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah. I remember years ago when my son dislocated his hip, which was a really huge, big injury. He missed a ton of school and he had to fly somewhere to get surgery. People always said to me, "Oh my God, how do you let him play football again? Are you going to let him play?" And I just said, how can he not? If he doesn't think that he can and he can't focus on something so positive, what is going to make him get through this? So when I read that this morning, when you sent that over about Kilimanjaro, I thought, yeah, like we all need something positive to focus on beyond just like getting out of the house or beyond just, getting back to work. It's really important.
Or in your son's case, just facing the fear, knowing that thing that was scary at one point, you lived through it. And you can do it again, smarter, better, harder the next time.
Yep, absolutely. Welcome today. I'm just thrilled to have you and talk about all things marketing, COVID, production. And here we are, just 6 weeks. I know you guys are 6 weeks from working from home, which I'm blown away. I mean, I feel like every day feels like the same day. What was it like when you first started working from home?
Well, it was a change for sure. And I think that I've been calling this my 6-week anniversary of working from home. And I'm only celebrating it because Monday was the first and hopefully only birthday that I will be celebrating in quarantine.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. So as far as the timeline went, it was strange and swift. On March 16th, I think it was a Friday, the company proposed this tiered approach to working from home in response to the state and federal news. Everyone kind of started taking their things home and prepping for that work from home scenario. And then over the weekend, California announced safer at home mandates. And by Monday, we were mandatory work from home, don't go into the office. And by Monday morning, we were sending around pictures of what our work from home setup looked like.
And I feel like we're all pretty good at working remotely. We have to do it all the time anyway. But I know it's not easy, right? We get to go back to our desks, and now here we are in our homes the whole time. And you and I were having this conversation earlier about how there really aren't any boundaries anymore. And I feel like we're working, around the clock.
Yeah.
Are you feeling the same thing?
Exactly the same thing. And I told you that depending on when you ask, I could be completely content and productive in my space, and then other times feeling completely cagey and restless.
Yeah, I said to you earlier that was me yesterday. I think I woke up and it was Monday, and I thought to myself, God, it's Monday. It's like, I have to gear up for another week. And I'm incredibly productive and juggling a million different things, and that keeps me energized. But something about it being a Monday yesterday just really kind of wiped me. It just made me, I think it just got me down. Like the idea that like it's Monday, but it's not really Monday because I'm working every day.
The weekends feel like the weekdays and vice versa.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, let's talk a little bit about production. so many of us are in a shelter in place. And obviously, we've gotten to this point where it's not civically responsible for any of us to really be shooting any big, large productions or anything at all. What are you and your clients talking about right now in terms of like are they creating any content right now? And how are they doing it?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I feel like that changes day to day, project to project, and it's an ongoing conversation. And I agree, there is this social responsibility for health and safety, and you shouldn't be pressured to take a job that puts either one of those things in jeopardy. And the really inspiring pieces of communication that I'm seeing from our partners, our vendors, our photographers, they're coming with it with some creative solutions. People that I work with regularly, they know our business and they're presenting solutions that are appropriate to what our clients need now. Everything from, what they can safely offer from their home studio to tech-based solutions to the existing offering their existing libraries as stock, which you and your photographers have been so quick to compile and offer to me and many other producers in this need. We can license unique and these specialized libraries that is such a great creative solution for producers to bring to their creative teams, and for that solution to be part of the conversation that we bring to client with what's possible.
I think that's so important because, for the photographers that are listening and even for the producers that are listening, I really wanted to kind of shift the conversation about stock from, yes, stock used to be insert photo here, right? So you would call me and say, hey, I need a picture of a father and a son jumping off of dock, swimming. Do you have that? Right? Because that was what your concept was. But I really wanted to flip it a little bit and get people thinking about, well, here's a whole collection of images. Here's a library of images that exist already that you can concept around. So to kind of be brought into the process a little bit earlier. And, we've gotten a good response from it. I think it's a way that I think people might need to be thinking in the future.
I agree. And we work with a photographer often. It's someone who has a great relationship with the client and understands the brand. And our shoot got canceled a week before we were supposed to fly out and have a still and video production. And he was quick to offer solutions that didn't necessarily get us to the high production quality that client might have been used to, but was something that he could do from the safety of a location, and that would get us to some point of a creative collaboration that could potentially satisfy the project's needs in a different but equally as valuable way.
I've been having so many conversations with producers about, photo shoot and video shoot producers as well as art producers about how important it is going to be and how important it is right now to have solutions, because we are in this unprecedented time and it's like the Wild West. Everybody's trying to do things, and the new content that is getting created is tending to look the same because people are pulling from the same stock footage. They're pulling from the same video footage, or they're giving people cameras, or phones and videotaping themselves. So everything is tending to look the same, although it makes sense because there's this sense of shared humanity. We're all kind of going through the same thing. But I think people who are going to rise to the top are the ones that are coming up with different solutions that are going to help let people kind of drift away from the pack a little bit.
I agree. I think we're in a moment, you're right, it's the Wild West, it's a little lawless, and whatever your solution is has relevancy if you know your audience. This photographer knew exactly the kind of messaging we were trying to put out there, what it should look like, what it should feel like, and he was like, here's my solution, and it's what I can do without needing anyone to come to me. And we can have the creative collaboration, and we can have the conversation, and we can have the intent just as if it were a photo shoot, but it's something that I can do as a solo artist in the space that I know and can create safely.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be really important even beyond when we don't have the shelter in place anymore. Because, a lot of these states are removing it, and maybe they should or should not. Time will only tell. But people are only going to do what they feel comfortable doing. So we're still going to need that solution. And in answer to that, I started something with a location scout named Jim Baldwin. We started a website called Create in Place, and it's just createinplace.com. And we're gathering photographers from all over that have the ability to shoot from in their homes with the talent that they have available to them, their kids, their parents that they're there with, their wives, their sisters, whoever is in their immediate area. And it's pretty amazing what they're pulling off
I
and what
saw
they
that.
have. Pardon?
I saw that. It is incredible. And I think what I'm interested in is seeing what solutions we're bringing to the table now that have legs outside of a crisis. We're kind of doing this out of necessity, and how those things will evolve to meet our needs and continue to meet our needs outside of this moment in time where we kind of have this mandatory pause. And I think
Exactly.
Create in Place is exactly the kind of thing that will gain traction and interest regardless of your specific situation.
And I think what's really important to say here is we're not looking to, replace production, right? Or drive costs down, but instead provide a solution when there's no other solution available at the moment. And also encourage clients and agencies and photographers, everybody, to recognize that just because a photographer is going to be creating something in their home or in the area that is most accessible and safe for them at the moment doesn't mean that it's going to be inexpensive.
Exactly.
There's still costs, very significant costs involved in what's happening, and you're still creating content for someone. So I think in this transition phase, I keep calling it, we're in the shelter in place phase right now, and what's going to come next is this produce and protect stage. And I think that's going to mean something different for every person and every photographer and every crew member and every talent. Like there's an entire industry that has to feel comfortable here. And I think providing a resource for the community so that we can actually get shooting again. Like I want clients to choose photography production. I don't want them to choose CGI or illustration or alt type or, something else. I want them to know that there's still options for them to get unique content.
I agree. I don't see this as a opportunity to put pressure on the individuals that make productions happen. I don't expect rates to change, but I do expect to see different items to come up, whether or not they're shooting at home in a safe place, or if and when, however, we return to production in the new normal. I expect to see different line items and considerations to be made in those estimates and in those productions that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah. I mean, and there's so many conversations going on around that. I just was hosting an Instagram live with a producer who she and I were talking about the idea that like we were so efficient for so long with our production budgets, and we created so much value by being able to do more and more on set every day. And that is likely going to change because of the mere way in which we'll be able to actually set up a production. Can we have all of those people on set together anymore? Can the talent be waiting in the next room? The backup talent. Do we need backup talent? Yeah, we're going to need backup talent. How long is it going to take to check everyone in and get them to sign their releases? And, can we create the same amount of work in the same day? I don't know yet. I mean, my guess is probably not. So does that mean a 1-day shoot becomes a 2-day shoot? And, if it becomes too expensive, then it's back to clients not wanting to shoot, right? And choosing other things. So I think we have to really work together to make sure everybody understands the importance of safety and getting the clients what they're hoping, but setting their expectations at the same time.
Yeah, setting expectations is so important. And I've heard you say this before, and I completely agree that our industry has been operating at a pace that was not sustainable. And it would be a shame for this moment to come and go and for us to return to the old normal, because with this mandatory pause comes different expectations on what production can look like.
And are your clients talking to you about that right now? Or are they just kind of really trying to be in the moment and just deal with what's in front of them?
That's interesting. It's also because it's unknown. So they're looking
Right.
to us for expectation management, of course, and solutions. And it comes up on every project because every project is in some phase of pre-production or production. And the question of can we shoot or when can we shoot, it's such a great unknown. And I can only speak for the brands that I work with. And my clients have been incredibly reasonable. It's kind of hard not to be in a time like this. To expect to shoot with the production quality that they're used to would just feel a little reckless and irresponsible. So our clients are looking to us to understand what is possible. They don't expect to be able to shoot the way that we have, but they're asking for solutions that will help them continue to create content.
So, Emily, talk to me a little bit about how your agency, or maybe you're talking to other people, and how their agencies are helping their clients right now.
That's a conversation that continues to go around in our agency. And a lot of creatives have had a lot of good opinions about this. You know, agencies need to look outward in order to look within. And that's kind of what our agency is doing. I think clearly our industry will be greatly affected in the time ahead, and customers will limit spending, which leads to clients limiting spending. It's inevitable. So when I was talking to one of my creatives, he's totally brilliant, and I go to him for a lot of conceptual, creative conversations. And the thing that he said was, the only thing that will not cease is the need to communicate relevant information to our audience. And the question is, what do we do differently in a world that has clearly changed? How do we adapt that approach? So long as our clients exist, they'll be asking for the same thing. So we only lose if we don't think alongside them. And I thought that was so brilliant.
That's so on point. You know, my husband has an ad agency that's sold to a consulting company, and they're busier than ever right now because all of their clients are looking to them to help pivot in this time, right? And figure out what is their messaging now? What does their business need to change, and how, right? You're going to have the Charmans of the world, right? The toilet paper companies of the world that have been like booming, right? So their messaging may change a little bit, but they're going to be in a really good spot financially to be able to kind of continue advertising, I'm guessing, or maybe they don't even need to, because it's who needs to advertise at this point. But then you have like the StubHubs of the world. This came up on the webinar the other day. Like, what does that company look like, right? Their business model is around selling tickets to concerts and large events. So how does that look like? So I'm sure their agencies are helping them figure out how to stay relevant. And that's such an amazing point that your creative director made, because that's literally the point, is communicating how you're relevant. And if you can help your brand and your client stay relevant, you know, there'll be a role.
I agree. Our value comes in telling that brand story, and that brand story evolves with circumstance and time. And so how do we adapt that approach to be able to tell a story that resonates with the audience?
Yeah, I think that's going to be really important. And I think, you know, so much of what I'm hearing on my side of the table from reps and producers and people in the production world is, we're curious about what production is going to look like when we come back. But before we can get to that, I think all these clients and these brands have to figure out how they are going to be existing in this new world, including what do they message now, and what does that look like for them in the future. And then people can begin concepting ideas for them, which then trickles down to the production community.
I think you're right. I think we can work backwards in that too, because just like you send me these great resources of Create in Place, and your photographers compiling these stock libraries, those are things that kind of go up the chain instead of down the chain, right? Like you're sharing resources with me that I can share with a creative that will eventually get shared with a client. And whatever that solution is that seems to fit their need is something that will come right back to you in a way that can be activated on.
Well, and you know, one thing I've been talking to my photographers about for a long time now is this idea of their capabilities. And forever, I mean, for a career, my whole entire career, we depended on their imagery speaking for themselves, right? Oh my gosh, Andy Anderson has this beautiful image, this beautiful portrait. I would send it to you. You'd be like, oh my God, Andy Anderson. You'd share it with your team, and they'd be like, oh, I want to shoot with Andy Anderson. Well, it doesn't have to work that way anymore. I feel like there's a brand, and there's a messaging, and there's a point of view that comes with what a photographer stands for. And part of that is what their capabilities are. So we've been communicating capabilities to our clients for quite a long time. And I think it's been catching on, the idea that you can bring a photographer into the process a lot sooner than you would have. But I see in the future it being even more important, because beyond just wanting to create a visual, you have to make sure you understand how to create that visual before you even present that concept to the client, because that's going to be part of the conversation.
That's where the specialties and the expertise of photographers become so valuable. And if you send me any Andy Anderson photograph, I'm printing it out, I'm hanging it up, I'm sharing it with all my friends because he's one of my favorites. But in addition to that specialized vision and what you go to that photographer for, that voice, I think something that will also come out of this is some unexpected partnerships and relationships from photographers collaborating with, whether it's a CGI artist or a DP or a director, or honing in those skills that kind of make their offerings more robust and their business more resilient in an industry that's forever changing.
I do think you're right. And I think, it's going to be up to all of us, the art producers, the photographers, the crew, the hair and makeup, casting, everyone, to kind of shape what is possible. And I think now, when we've pushed the pause button, is to have all of those conversations with people and solidify those relationships and share what you can do and what you can provide, and be a partner, a true partner. Be more than just a creative partner where you're helping to execute a spec sheet. Be a true partner that's going to help shape our industry and shape what an agency can deliver creatively.
You're absolutely right. And that relationship will come out of those unexpected partnerships between photographer and CG artist. But you're right, those relationships can start with photographer and a creative director at an agency when they're concepting an idea and they just want to have fresh eyes or know what's possible, just another resource to develop an idea, develop a project. So every step of the game, when they're selling it in to client, when they're having those conversations with client on what's possible, and every wrench that's thrown into those conversations about can we and what if we and what about this, then that creative can have the photographer's voice in their mind and kind of speak on behalf of not only the creative intentions, but what's possible with a vendor that they're partnering with.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be a big part of it. Somebody on the webinar the other day was also talking about having to have multiple options for getting something done. And I thought that was really interesting because, we're already creating treatments that take a long time and obviously not getting paid for. And we are already thinking of estimating sometimes multiple different concepts. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like. What are the different options? Does a creative team have to come up with multiple creative options for the same concept for us to estimate or consider all the different possibilities on how to shoot it? That will get complicated. I definitely could see that happening, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, that's a huge unknown, when we get back to a production level that agencies, photographers, and clients are used to. What is the new normal? What does it look like? What does it accommodate for? And I don't think we're at that point just yet, but I think these conversations are all leading up to what will eventually be best practices when we're able to collaborate in an in-person environment.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's talk a little bit about marketing right now, because I know a lot of photographers still are curious about if it's okay to market to you. A lot of people say yes. Some people say they just want solutions-oriented emails or marketing pieces. What's coming across your desk or in your inbox, and what are the things that are resonating with you?
I think it's totally appropriate to market right now. As long as you know your audience and you're presenting real solutions and you're not tone deaf to the impact of the situation on the people that you're communicating with, your message is authentic and it's not a sale, but perhaps a solution. I think those things are very well received. And not only do I forward those pieces of communication that are relevant and specific to our needs, creatives have been asking for it. When I send them out and I'm like, this is an interesting solution that someone came up with that allows them to continue to make content in these different and relevant ways, then I get more interest because that helps a creative develop ideas in what's possible now. And they can concept all they'd like, but without some basis in reality of what's possible and who can do that thing, those ideas might stop short. So I think,
Yeah.
and you also send the beautiful picture, make it relevant. I think The only thing that is not relevant, maybe not helpful, I think are things like emails or communication that's asking me, how can we help? I don't have I don't know. I am being inspired by your emails, how to move forward with creative solutions. And those are things that I share. And those are things that motivate more conversations to provide solutions and will hopefully be what the new normal starts to look like.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point where you said it's not very helpful to ask you how you can help. I feel like I get a lot of those emails too. And, it's really hard to manage the inbox right now. So don't make me reply to you. Don't make me give you something back. Like, don't ask anything of me. Just the way I need help right now is to provide me with solutions or open my eyes to something or share some information that would be helpful for me to then go and share. But otherwise, the how can we help emails
Are not helpful.
they're not helpful. No, they're not helpful. There was a producer that was on these messaging boards talking about, what production would look like in the future. And they're gathering the troops and everyone's having these big conversations. And I called her and I said, I'm not calling you to say, here I am, we should do this, let's do it, and then not do anything about it. I'm here to tell you that here are my strengths and here are the ways in which I can help you. And if you want any of that, let me know. Otherwise, I'm happy to chime in every now and again on what you're up to. But she was like, oh my God, thank you so much. Everybody's reaching out saying, yes, we should do this. Let's do this. Let me know how I can help. And, she's like, I don't know. I can't keep up with all of it.
Right. I agree. Without a call to action or without an example of a solution, it's a conversation. And those are valuable, of course. But I think when it really starts to gain momentum is when someone has an example of something that has worked, or even if it's a in concept, or we're trying this thing out, or this has worked for another client. Those are the ones that tend to be actionable.
Definitely. I agree. What kind of tools are you using to work remotely? Is there anything you can share that, I mean, everybody knows about Zoom. We're all over that. And I love that you and I were emailing this morning saying, don't worry, this isn't Zoom.
I do love a Zoom call, but also I don't need to see everyone all the time. I feel like I'm a pastor out here on camera. Like I gotta get ready for the day. Other than Zoom, we work a lot on Slack. We work a lot with post production, and all of that feedback is getting bounced from our editors to our creatives to our client with Frame.io. And we've always had remote access to our server, when we're on location, we're on shoots, or when we're just out of the office for any files that we need to access. But a lot of our larger files take a long time to download. They take a long time to upload. So I'm interested in seeing what a long-term solution might look for that, because everything that lives on our server, raw files and libraries and past shoots and video files, are massive. And we have a lot of frustration built around the time it takes to upload and download and edit.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversations around that. I think a lot of agencies are feeling the same thing, and it's hard to transfer files around that are that big and do the work on them that's necessary. And I'm hearing the same thing in terms of people talking about remote shooting, right? About the Wi-Fi or the cell service that is going to be needed in order to effectively live stream something or at least share the captures from a shoot. And I think these are real concerns of everyone about how to continue working remotely.
There was an example I saw from a boutique agency, and it seemed really innovative, but I'm not sure how realistic it is, because it was, and I don't know what they're measuring their success by, but it was a combination of remote capture, digital approvals, an automated camera arm. And, I've seen those things in place of other things in shoots, but all of those things together seemed super cool. But I don't have a firsthand experience of a need for
Wait, what
it.
would the automated camera arm do? How would that work? Like it's somewhere else that the photographer isn't?
Yeah, like it was like a hinge that could move around a studio set, like a small studio set. And instead of, manually moving a tripod, it would be a camera on an arm, like a robotic arm that would move and capture different angles of whatever was in your studio setup.
Oh, that's so funny. I was literally just having a conversation with a producer about that this morning and wondering what that would look like. So yeah, it's interesting that people are talking about that.
Yeah, I've never seen all of those things happen at once, right? The automated camera arm, the remote capture, and digital approvals, right? That's a lot. That's a lot all at once. And I haven't
Yeah.
had, firsthand experience or the need, but it definitely seems interesting.
Well, and I keep saying this on the different podcasts and stuff and webinars that I've been on, but look what we've accomplished. It's been 6 weeks, right? It's less for some people. We've accomplished so much. So imagine where we're going to be in another month or two if we still need to be coming up with solutions like this. So it'll be very cool to watch and see what unfolds. We're a very creative, resourceful group for sure.
We are. It has been quite inspiring to see. Creating new content is not really possible right now. We're trying to figure out ways on how to do that. And so until we do, auditing existing assets and seeing what can be repurposed, re-edited, reworked in other ways, super valuable. That I'm assuming that will build up to some crescendo of what a digital production looks like. It's interesting for sure, but I don't discount the value in creative collaboration on set.
Well, before we leave, I'd love to just explore just a little bit about any experiences or thoughts or conversations you might be privy to for photographers who are trying to figure out how to protect themselves right now in terms of conditions. And once they start shooting again, what sort of things, I know what they're thinking about, but what are you hearing that insurance will look like? What are clients going to be requiring in terms of cancellation abilities of shoots and things like that? Have conversations gotten that far on your end yet?
They have gotten that far on our ends, and I have been very involved with a few productions that have been submitted to insurance. And while we don't have a conclusion on what that will actually look like, I can kind of give you an update on the process of how we got there. And I know a lot of photographers have had their shoots impacted at various stages of production as a result of the safer at home mandates. I'm currently working through these two, and as an industry, it kind of seemed like the initial conversation was, do we postpone this shoot or do we cancel this shoot? And as we were having that conversation with our production inside of our agency, it quickly became apparent that there was not a date in the future to postpone the shoot to. Not to mention, the needs of that shoot would be very different if and when we were able to reshoot. So those factors made the decision to cancel inevitable. So as we worked through what those scenarios would look like with the photographer and the rep and the production company, there were a few ways to present those solutions to client. And one of those negotiable items that was presented that I found to be not only brilliant, but a testament to the longstanding client-vendor relationship was the idea that our photographer was going to discount the fees of a postponement or a cancellation if the client was going to be paying for that shoot that they ultimately received no deliverables for. So that was a result of a very long conversation of, how do we negotiate this down? What's best for client? What's best for vendor? And we understood that if this was going to get submitted to insurance, that the cancellation costs were going to be submitted for the full amount. And there was no discount offered or extended to insurance, right? That discount was in respect to the client vendor relationship. So, of course, this claim was going to go through insurance. And so, where we're at now is that it's just slowly moving through the insurance claim process and the investigation. So, I think what saved this and what will continue to be a relevant point in our production declaration is much of this section that's based on the motion picture production agreement that brings force majeure into the conversation. And of course, a force majeure event is French for superior force, but it's basically a contract that relieves parties from performing their contractual obligations when certain circumstances beyond their control arise, making, in our case, a production inadvisable or impractical or illegal or impossible. So we've continued with production up until we were denied resources or declined resources. And in our case, our permits were denied because there weren't the resources, they weren't issuing permits. Our state patrol was denied. So those tangible items of resources being declined are the exact thing that insurance was looking for. And I think with the advisement of our legal counsel and insurance, that after this investigation comes to a close, which could be weeks or months, we'll have a very fair assessment of how to recover these costs on behalf of the vendor and on behalf of the client.
Well, I find that really interesting because in the very beginning, I was hearing so much about how COVID-19 is not a force majeure and how insurance companies are not recognizing it as such, which I cannot speak to whether or not that is accurate or not. I like hearing that, you are in the middle of a situation where you're trying to figure that out. You're navigating that. And I'm sure the insurance agencies are trying to figure that out for themselves as well, because if that were the case, there's going to be a lot of them. And I think it'll also probably depend on if the government bails out the insurance companies, because if they do, they'll be more likely to be paying out, or not giving people a hard time about as much of a hard time as they could about the contracts.
I think you're exactly right. And of course, this is the first time I'm dealing with an insurance claim of this magnitude. And I'm interested to see in the investigation phase what kind of questions come out of that and what is warranted as a legitimate claim and things that are going to be challenged. So maybe we can do like a follow up on what happens.
Yeah, that would be great, because I think it's also going to inform how we proceed in the future, right?
Well,
When we commit to a production, is it going to be up to the photographer to say, yeah, I can't provide these resources anymore, so now the liability falls on the photographer? Or like no one's really going to want to hold on to the liability there. So it's really going to be interesting.
That's a great question. I have two things to say about that. I think some very good advice that I got from our insurance representative was insurance does not cover for fear. So for the photographer or for the production company to say, I can't provide or I can't do this because of extenuating circumstances is a choice. But when they are engaged in the production and circumstances outside of their control, in our example, it was location permits and state patrol, things that were not offered to us, that were denied to our production, that made it impossible, right? So we documented those things. And the other part of this was how to move forward with a production in this current environment. And I don't have an example of that, but in response to these insurance claims that we've been putting out, we understand that there was a few projects in pre-production and ready to shoot. And I think that in response to projects that were in pre-production or that haven't been declared to insurance, client is now required to sign a move forward agreement. And this basically states that client understands, acknowledges, and agrees that the insurance required will not cover any delays. It won't cover postponement or cancellation due to COVID-19. So it basically makes them responsible for all associated costs and risk. And as of this recording, we have not had anyone sign that move forward agreement.
Okay, so back up for just a second. So who is the them in it basically makes them responsible for all associated risks and costs? Is that the client or is that the vendor?
This is the client. So the move forward agreement is presented to all parties, but makes the client responsible for all associated costs and risk if there is a delay, postponement, cancellation, etc., due to COVID-19.
So has nobody signed that yet because there's not an opportunity to sign a move forward agreement, or is that because they refuse to sign it?
No one has refused to sign it. It's been part of the conversation. It just hasn't gotten to that point yet.
Hasn't gotten to that. It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's going to be more of that kind of stuff happening, and lots of conversations around this, and people wanting to put more formal things in place and very standard things that we're all talking about.
I think that move forward agreement kind of signifies best practices,
Well, Emily, this was so helpful and really, really insightful and informative. I know that the people who listen to the podcast are emailing me for answers to these kind of questions, and you answered so many of them for me today. So I thank you so much. This was really fantastic. And I mean, you've always been so insightful and positive and energetic. And full of great information. So I'm not surprised.
Well, I will throw those compliments right back to you because since I was an art buyer in Chicago and we met at a work event, you have continued to be a source of inspiration and information and just a wonderful community leader. And that extends to these very uncertain times.
Well, thank you, Emily. And thank you for trusting me to come on as a guest. And it's fantastic to hear your voice. And the only bummer is that it wasn't a Zoom call where I could see your face. So thank you.
Don't worry, I'll FaceTime you after this.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not sure what room you're going to go sit in now, but I hope you are surrounded by everyone and everything you need. And I'm glad you got all your birthday love yesterday. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. You too, Heather.